Okay, so we're going to look this morning at probably one of the most familiar passages of Scripture that you'll find, which is John chapter 3 and verse 16. And it says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God." Okay, so I guess if you knew absolutely nothing about Christianity and somebody said to you, what do Christians believe? What do they believe particularly about Jesus? Most people would say, oh yeah, they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And so from this point of view, I think it must be the one thing that separates Christianity from so many other religions that seem similar in so many ways. They all believe in one God, and there are many other differences, I know. But, you know, so many of these monotheistic religions that say, yeah, well, I'm the same, I believe in one God. And some will even say, yeah, we believe in Jesus. But the question is this: do they believe that Jesus is the Son of God? That's one of the main issues, one of the main doctrines that separates true Christianity from so many other religions. And so we're going to look into that this morning and see what the Bible has to say about it. Okay, so we start with two, I guess you call them fundamental truths, very clear things that the Bible is saying. Firstly, number one, God has a Son. And number two, God sent his Son to save the world. That's his mission, isn't it? That's the mission of Jesus. He came to save the world. So it begs some further questions then. Firstly, save the world from what? What is it that God sent his Son to save the world from? And secondly, how does the Son save? You know, I want us to consider these questions as we go through this this sermon this morning. Just consider those questions. What is it that the Son wants to save you from, and how does he save? Alright, so I want to show first of all that the Bible does indeed teach that Jesus is God's Son. And so I'm just going to run through a few scriptures now, and you can look them up if you want. I'm going to go fairly quickly. But this is just to establish that the Bible is in fact saying that Jesus is God's Son. Matthew 3:17, when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, we read, "And lo, a voice came from heaven saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" Again, Luke 9:35, during the transfiguration on the mount, there came a voice out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." Matthew 15-16, when Jesus asks Peter, he says, Peter's saying, yeah, they say you're all these different people. Some say you're Elijah and so on. And Jesus says to Peter, well, who do you say that I am? Peter answers, "Thou art the Christ," the Messiah, "the Son of the living God." And then Matthew read it for us in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 2. It says that God hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. So there you have the disciples, the apostles of Jesus, all saying that, yeah, Jesus is the Son of God. That's who he is. And also there is a supernatural attestation to this, that the voice of God is heard by witnesses saying, "This is my Son." So we're going to bring this information together and just kind of hold it on one side for a moment. And it's fairly clear that the Bible, all the people are saying that, yes, this Jesus, he is the Son of God. That's who he is. We could further cite Romans 8:32, Colossians 1:13, or 1 Thessalonians 1 verse 10, all of which are saying that Jesus is God's Son. And we could go to many other different places where it may not be stated explicitly, but it is implicit within the verses of the text that Jesus is the Son of God. That's the testimony of the writers of the Bible. They are declaring that Jesus is the Son of God. But the question is, what does Jesus say? What did Jesus think about himself? Did he think that he was the Son of God? You know, many people, after their death, people elevate them to extraordinary levels, don't they? And the person concerned has no say in the matter. And so many people elevate other men and women to levels where perhaps if the person was alive or had any say in it, they would say, no, that's not the case at all. In fact, I think of one very specific case, Haile Selassie, who was the emperor of Ethiopia. Many people said that he's the Son of God, and he specifically stated, I am not the Son of God. One of his titles is King of Kings, and so I said, well, he's the Son of God, he's the Messiah, but he specifically stated, no, I'm not. So men and women just seem to have this thing, don't they? They want to elevate other men or other women to a position and put them on a pedestal, turn them into gods. But, you know, what did Jesus think of himself? Did he really think that he was the Son of God? Or is it just other people who are just saying that about? They just got a very high view of him, and it's so natural for them to just say, oh, he's the Son of God. Let's have a look at a scripture. It's Mark 12. The Gospel of Mark, verse 12. And what's interesting about this scripture is that it's probably one of the oldest scriptures that we have of the New Testament. Mark is the oldest of the Gospels. And so it's probably the closest in terms of time, you know, written at the time of Jesus. And so we have Jesus' own words. And he starts to tell a parable. It's Mark chapter 12 and verse 1. And he, that's Jesus, began to speak unto them by parables. And he says this, a certain man planted a vineyard and set a hedge about it, and digged a place for the wine vat, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen. A husbandman is like a tenant, like a farmer. He let it out to husbandmen, and he went into a far country. And at the season he sent to the husbandman a servant, that he might receive from the husbandman of the fruit of the vineyard. And they caught him, and beat him, and sent him away empty. And again he sent unto them another servant, and at him they cast stones, and wounded him in the head, and sent him away shamefully handled. And again he sent another, and him they killed, and many others beating some, and killing some. Having yet therefore one son, his well-beloved, he sent him also last unto them, saying, they will reverence my son. But those husbandmen said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance shall be ours. And they took him and killed him, and cast him out of the vineyard. What shall therefore the Lord of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the husbandman, and will give the vineyard unto others. And have you not read this scripture? The stone which the builders rejected is become the head of the corner. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvellous in our eyes. And they, that is the scribes and the Pharisees, sought to lay hold on him, but feared the people, for they knew that he had spoken the parable against them, and they left him and went their way. It's a very interesting parable. Just to explain a little bit of it, we start with a certain man. He's later on called the Lord of the vineyard. This is symbolic of God himself. That's what it is in the parable. The Lord of the vineyard is God. The husbandmen, or the tenants, they are the scribes and the Pharisees. That's why at the end they say they understood that he spoke this parable against them. It's a criticism of them. It's a warning against them. Then we also have the servants that the Lord of the vineyard sends out. The servants are the prophets. But then as we come through the parables, we read through it, and as all the servants have been mistreated and shamefully used, we read that the Lord of the vineyard says, I will send my son. Now, who is the son? Who is Jesus talking about when he says that the Lord of the vineyard, who quite clearly from this parable is God, has a son? Can only be referring to himself in this context. He's talking about himself. So it is clear that Jesus himself regarded himself as the Son of God. Now, if you're to discuss this with someone like, say, for example, a Muslim apologist, they will tell you that they believe that Jesus was a prophet. In fact, we had this conversation on Thursday, I think it was, in Manchester with a Muslim gentleman. They believe that Jesus was a prophet, a great prophet, perhaps even the greatest of the prophets, apart from Muhammad himself. But they say, well, Jesus never claimed to be God's son. That's one of the things they say. He never actually said, I am God's son. And you might wonder, when you read through the Bible, you think, when you have conversations like this with people, you think, well, why doesn't the Bible, why at no point does Jesus suddenly say, okay, everybody gather around, I have something very important to tell you, I'm God's son. You know, why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he just make a very plain and simple declaration, let everybody know that he's God's son? He's so different, isn't he, from the sort of the David Icks and the Sun Myung Moons of the world, who come out and say, yeah, that's who I am, I'm the Son of God, or I'm the Son of the Godhead, I think David Icke said. But they're claiming something quite openly, quite explicitly, but Jesus doesn't do that. It's one of the other things, one of the many things that marks him out as being different from so many men, isn't it? That he doesn't do that. He doesn't raise his voice and wave a flag and say, I am the Son of God, here I am, everybody come and bow down and worship me. Why doesn't he do that? Isaiah 53 verse 7 says this about Jesus, a messianic prophecy. He says, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. Jesus Christ was fulfilling the prophecy of Scripture. It was one of the things that would mark him out as the Messiah, as God's anointed, as the one that everyone was waiting for, would be that he wouldn't do that. That he would go to his death like a sheep is silent. He would go to the slaughter without saying, but don't you know who I am? He let the power of God speak for itself. And you know, sometimes I think that's how God comes into people's hearts, is almost quietly, with a quiet understanding, with a quiet stirring of your conscience. Wait. The truth is starting to dawn. I'm starting to see the truth that Jesus is the Son of God. However improbable, however bizarre that might sound, that God sometimes comes so quietly and so gently into our hearts and then completely and utterly changes us. And so that's why you can read through the Bible. It's very difficult to find anywhere where he will openly say, I am Jesus, the Son of God. But it is, as they say, writ large throughout the New Testament. Many of the things that Jesus says, and we've looked at them. We looked at some last week where he says, I am, before Abraham was. I am, using that phrase that God spoke to Moses right back in Exodus 3. I am is a phrase that shows his divinity, shows that he is more than simply a man, more than simply the son of Joseph and Mary. So Jesus Christ was fulfilling messianic prophecies of the Bible, whose words spoke clearly with an eloquence through his ministry and his life and, of course, his death on the cross. The whole mission of the Son of God, as we read earlier, was to save the world from their sins.